You all probably know about the new generation of My Little Pony. Friendship is magic. It has, for one reason or another, become an overnight sensation. Whatever or not you like the show yourself, you have to admit that its success is impressive. However, it raises a question. Lauren Faust has worked on other popular shows and has been working on her own line of toys, the Galaxy Girls. How did she wind up creating the remake of some 80s toy commercial instead of working on her own ideas? Could it be that she's just nostalgic about her childhood MLP toys or something? But even then, what artist would rather work on their own ideas? I had read this story about a few years ago. It was about 6 girls who all went to the same school and died on the same day, January 18th, 1989. A friend of mine from NC sent me an article about a small local newspaper. I forgot about it until I was watching a few episodes of My Little Pony and realized that the main characters were surprisingly similar to the girls who died. I decided to look at that article again. The paper had either gotten shut down or I had misread their name, so I tried tracking down my own World of Warcraft buddy and asked him for the article. Turned out that he happened to have the file saved on his computer, and I was right. There was a definite connection there. The first girl, named Samantha Gales, was obviously an inspiration for Fluttershy. A shy, introverted girl. What her classmates didn't know about her was that she was constantly abused at home by her mother and stepfather. Her mother conceived her at the age of 15, and she blamed poor Samantha for ruining her life. This made Samantha self-conscious when her stepfather moved in. This made the neglect worsen. Her stepfather never liked having to take care of Samantha when her mother was always away, so he would lock her in the basement and leave her, sometimes for a whole day. Her mother tolerated this, and as she grew, would hit Samantha for taking out on turn when her half-sister was born. The abuse became considerably worse. She would be starved, forced to sleep outside, sometimes beaten outright. Because she's dressed in shabby clothes and low self-esteem, she was often picked on by the other kids at school. Only her friends were animals she could rescue, which her family would make her get rid of. She killed herself by overdosing on Valium. The second, named Janice Walters, was away of the popular girls. She was rich, smart, beautiful, and seemed to live a charmed life. However, her parents argued constantly and were only together for appearances. She was held up against a high standard, which made her a perfectionist. She wanted to be a designer and live in Paris, but her parents wanted her to remain in Carolina and marry a proper man, one of good breeding and high income. For her most part, her parents ignored her. Her parents could only concern what was appearing rich and high social standing. But in reality, her mother married her father because of money, and since he had accumulated so much debt, they had been losing money fast. This is what got her interested in fashion intentionally, since she started making her own fashionable clothes to maintain her appearance of wealth. She died in a car crash when her mother and father got into an argument over money while he was driving. Her neck was snapped on impact, and she died instantly. She was clearly an inspiration for Rarity. Then there was Alexandra Matthews. Alex was a competitive girl. She always sought to be the best at best, especially at sports, track in particular. Her father always wanted a boy, but since her mother was declared incapable of having another child, he decided to raise her as if she was his son. At the end, though, she loved her mother and father and was more than happy to play sports with her father. She excelled at them, even. This made her popular, and by the time she was in high school, she was being sought out by athletic scouts from colleges all over the country. This made her even try harder. She had always wanted to compete in Olympics. However, when she was 15, her mother, who had been told that she could never have another child, had a son. After that, her parents didn't even pay much attention to her, which made her even more determined to succeed. She ended up pushing herself so hard at track, She neglected her friends, her grades, and even her personal health. One at part, she became so desperate she started taking steroids. With what her and her family didn't know was that she had a heart condition that steroids worsened. Since she was pushing herself so hard physically well, she ended up collapsing during a match due to a side heart complication. She died in the hospital a few days later. In the show, Rainbow Dash seems to be almost similar. The girl that most similar to Applejack, Jamie Saunders, was a farm girl, just like the character based off of her. What the show didn't include was that her farm was a rundown, and her family was always struggling with money. She oftentimes worked odd jobs under the table to try and help her support her family. She had made many brothers and sisters, and she was the second, which meant it was up to her and her older brother to take care of the youngins. This meant that she didn't have enough time to hang out with her friends, or take the extracurricular activities, or even do her homework on most nights. She had an aunt, whom her family from Manhattan was based off, who kept offering to send money to support her and her mother and father, but they were proud and always refused. This was until her father died from a heart attack in 1985. Her mother followed shortly after, killing herself when she couldn't handle the pressure of taking care of all the children. They were all taken by their gentle grandma, who was incapable of truly taking care of them. Jamie herself oftentimes helped out with the other family's yard work to keep her family afloat. She died when she fell into a wood chipper. Pinkie Pie's inspiration probably has the saddest story. Katherine Jackson was a foster child, had moved from home to home. Her birth father killed her mother and himself in a fit of rage when she was 5, and she could never quite settle into a good home. Some of the foster families who would take her in, merely interested in her financial support adopting a child, would bring, and would refuse to feed or clothe her. Even when she was nice with a good home family, the old memories still haunt her, breaking her fragile sanity into a million of pieces. She would have nightmares of her mother screaming and bleeding, and her father screaming for her, claiming to be after her next. By the time she was in high school, she completely snapped. She started to hallucinate and act out in class. Many of the other kids and teachers assumed that she was merely hyperactive and was trying to be funny. She would oftentimes paint and draw and write about fantastical things, and dressed over-the-top clothing. All while her condition was getting worse and worse, the voices and images becoming more realistic and more demanding. She died when she jumped off a building, one of the voices having told her she could fly. That what makes her a last fact even more chilling was that Lauren originally designed Pinkie Pie to be a Pegasus, as what seemed in her early development sketches. The last Twilight Sparkle's inspiration was a student by the name of Cynthia Little. She was held up to a high standard from a young age. Her older brother was always getting awards for academics and athletic achievement, and she was always held to the same high standard. She ended up neglecting her other facets of her life in order to make sure that she got the best grades. For a while this worked. Her parents were proud of their accomplishments and bragged to their friends about not having just one genius child, but 2. That is until a few local private academy for gifted started to become interested in her. Among several other advanced students, she knew that this would be the best opportunity she could have to prove herself as the perfect child. But the pressure was high. She knew that there was limited spots for new students, and she knew that there would be a test and an essay required to get in. So she became a little desperate. She studied to the point where she could hardly eat, never sleep, and as the test closed in, she panicked. She opted to find an essay copy, and during the test resorted into cheating. When she was caught, her parents were horrified. She sank into deep depression, and eventually hung herself to save her the shame of being an imperfect daughter. You might be wondering why Lauren Faust would be inspired to make such a sweet children's show, inspired by such depressing events. Perhaps she felt some odd of needed to give these girls closure. Perhaps to tell stories in other ways she could. Think about it. In one episode named The Cutie Mark Chronicles, Each pony describes of how they each earn their one's cutie mark. Rainbow Dash was the one to make Sonic Rain Boom on the same day for all the girls to see and make them be able to earn their cutie marks. Clearly makes you tend to wonder about each girl's death in real life on the same day. And in the show, Fluttershy is able to take care of animals she adores. Rarity is a successful designer with loving parents. Rainbow Dash is in fact with a good athlete. Applejack has a successful farm. Pinkie Pie is just happy with not a care in the world. And Twilight Sparkle accepted into an exclusive school. Maybe, just maybe, she wanted to give the spirits to these girls what they always wanted. And I think they're happy.